In the industry of real estate, professionals out there need to be more aware and understanding that these things are going to happen slowly. Don't get super excited about these Fed cuts or not cuts. It's not actually what's, at the end of the day, going to really drive those mortgage rates. Welcome back, y'all. There's a lot of uncertainty going on in the market right now. As always, we're going to cut over to Ruben and talk about all the things that are certain and uncertain and get his breakdown of what's next. So, hi, Ruben.
Hi, Jen.
Hey, so what are the three things we're going to talk about in this episode as we exit 2024 and look towards 2025?
So first, we're going to do a little review work of who is the Fed, what's their job, just kind of set the tone, like understanding. So then we can talk about what the last Fed meeting meant for the economy and for real estate as well. And that will, of course, lead us into a little bit of a discussion about interest rates and what mortgage rates specifically are doing lately.
So, Ruben, we get this question a lot. Who or what is the Fed? Because they just had a meeting recently, and this question is coming up again.
Yeah, so the Fed is our central bank, meaning they manage monetary policy for the entire country.
It's a big job.
Yeah, and if you remember back to like your government or civics classes, there's two types of policy, essentially monetary policy and fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is government spending and taxes. Monetary policy has to do with interest rates and essentially the amount of money circulating in the economy and who manages that.
Okay. So the Fed is in control of both of those things. And the Fed chair is?
Jerome Powell, who we saw in the meeting.
That's right.
And they have really two mandates that kind of dictate how they act. The first being to maintain the economy at near full employment. And the second is stable prices. And for us now, stable prices means inflation at or near 2%. And they have to balance the risk to between the two, right? Because sometimes you may have more inflation, sometimes you may have more unemployment, and what you do to one impacts the other. So coming off of where we are right now, we've been coming off of inflation. That's been the main concern, which is why interest rates are so high.
Gotcha.
Unemployment's been low, so they've been worried about that.
So they're just trying to stop us from spending money like crazy people, like many of us were doing in the early 2020s, 2021, even into 2022, or even like I try to convince my college student to live on a budget. We just, we're not doing that. And we were spending all of our money. And the Fed is now saying, no, we need to stop. So these interest rates, these conversations around the interest rates have helped to pull that money back out of the economy. Did I get that right?
Yeah, and we're on the other side of that now, right? They're now lowering interest rates because they're basically saying inflation's coming back into target, like we're getting to that 2% mark, and we're more worried about employment now. And that was kind of one of the big takeaways from the last couple of Fed meetings, and this one again. He specifically said the labor market is no longer a significant source of inflationary pressure.
The unemployment rate is notably higher than it was a year ago, but it has edged down over the past 3 months and remains low at 4.1% in October. Nominal wage growth has eased over the past year, and the jobs-to-workers gap has narrowed. Overall, a broad set of indicators suggests that conditions in the labor market are now less tight than just before the pandemic in 2019. The labor market is not a source of significant inflationary pressures.
Now that pressure is removed, and they've actually seen employment, that ratio has come back to almost even again. So they basically said that's normalized.
Yeah.
Wages have slowed down, and they're saying we're more worried about unemployment going up now than we are about inflation coming up.
Gotcha. Because they want the businesses to feel comfortable spending money, which then allows them to hire more people.
Yeah, it's a delicate balancing act, right? Right now we're trying to stabilize employment, keep it low, but we don't want to come down too fast and increase inflation again, right?
Right.
And when they were trying to control inflation, it was the same story where they're raising interest rates. They wanted to raise them enough to get inflation back to normal levels, but they didn't want to send unemployment to the moon either. So it's all about keeping those two things kind of both in line with each other without throwing one out of whack as you try to correct.
Makes sense. And it is an important factor that I think some of us are looking past when we're getting a little upset about how high these mortgage rates are. But you and I have talked about this a lot. It's not a one-to-one effect. When the Fed says we're changing rates, it's not actually what causes mortgage rates to go up or go down, because the Fed is doing something a little different when they're changing their rates. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so the rate they change, the federal funds rate, is really the rate that banks lend money to each other overnight. It's like the shortest interest rate you can basically get.
Gotcha.
Right? Obviously, a mortgage is a much longer interest,
Usually
right?
30 years.
30 years. So the overnight rate does impact it, but it's not in a one-to-one way because of that huge difference in term. What it does impact first are short-term rates. So if you have a HELOC or something like that that's pegged to the prime rate, those are going to start to come down first because they're moving with those short-term interest rates.
Yeah. And if it's fair to say this, it is that those shorter term rates are not having to wait so long into the future that is a little more unknown. So it's easier to get those smaller interest rates on those shorter term loans because the bank doesn't have to bet on such an unknown, if you will.
Exactly.
Okay, that's fair. And so for mortgage rates, they're being tied to that 10-year treasury, as you talk about. And that's a little bit longer term. We're still not really sure where we're going to be kind of scenario. Is that why we're still seeing high rates?
Uncertainty about the future is a big part of what goes into long-term rates, right?
Yeah.
In a couple of ways. One is expectations for short-term interest rates, and the other is a term premium. Term premium is really a measure of what you were just talking about, like uncertainty over that 10-year, 30-year period where I need to get extra return just in case I'm wrong about my assumptions at the beginning of the loan, right? So if, we all wake up tomorrow and the world has decided something's changed and we now think there's going to be more inflation over the next 10 years than we thought yesterday, mortgage rates are going to go up.
Right.
Because that expectation for short-term interest rates is going to go up because we know that when inflation does happen, the Fed's going to raise rates again.
Yeah. So the government, the Fed, is hedging its bets on the future based on some uncertainty about where we're going to be because we have had a rough couple of years, right? It hasn't been as smooth sailing as it was a decade ago, if you will, or even just 3 years ago. So what I hear you saying is nothing's going to change quickly. And we need to build in our own level of certainty as professionals, right? In the industry of real estate, professionals out there need to be more aware and understanding that these things are going to happen slowly. Don't get super excited about these Fed cuts or not cuts. It's not actually what's at the end of the day going to really drive those mortgage rates. It's the overall economy. It's the overall way that we're feeling. We also just went through an election that brought us back a little bit of certainty, right? It's not about which party won. It's just that now we know. And now the markets can decide their fate based on the direction they believe we're going in. So all signs hopefully are pointing in the right direction right now also. And the certainty that the consumer can have right now is that there's plenty of inventory in most parts of the country, right? This is still a varying factor region to region. But they can definitely take advantage of the fact that there's more homes to look at, which means there's more options for them in their actual negotiation power. So they won't have any influence necessarily over those mortgage rates in the short term, but they can have influence on how much they end up paying out of pocket or what repairs are done or all kinds of things that affect that overall cost of buying a home. So I think what I also hear you saying is maybe take advantage of that because it's not going to change. Mortgage rates aren't going to change anything anytime soon.
Yeah, it's not going to happen overnight. To tease next month's market snapshot, we'll get into 2025 forecasts and predictions, right? We'll see what home sales, what we think about inventory, all that stuff. But that is to say, for now, the year's not going to be too dissimilar from this year.
That's right. And it can only get better. I mean, that's what I'm taking from the multiple times that we've talked about the fact that we've kind of hit the bottom and there's really not much more down that we can go. I mean, we're crossing our fingers and nothing out of the ordinary happens, right? But if things are just sort of trotting along the way they are and they continue to in 2025, it should at least get better. And mortgage rates should get a little better, but they're not going to get a lot better in the eyes of the folks who are waiting for this 3 or 4% thing that we just don't have any indication will ever happen again.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take a lot to get rates that far down. Right now, projections for next year are for rates coming down half a point,
Yeah.
maybe a point.
Maybe the high fives is what I've seen a few times. So
Yeah,
again,
high to
won't give it all away.
is probably where we're going if
Yep.
most projections out there right now are accurate. But we'll see if we actually get there, because that's the thing, is right now there's arguably like more risk to the upside of that than to the downside, in terms of meaning for the economy outperforming, doing better than what we expect than doing worse, which means that rates would come down potentially like slower rather than faster.
Yeah. That makes sense. And again, people have to take into consideration the fact that housing prices are still going up. They've slowed, but they're still moving in an upward direction. Mortgage rates are kind of hanging around in the 6s. They aren't really going anywhere really fast up or down. And like I said earlier, we've got the ability to talk to our clients about controlling what that mortgage payment is for them based on the information they have today, knowing that they can go in the market, negotiate, maybe get a great deal. And you talk to Gary all the time. Gary always says it's always the right time to buy the right piece of real estate. And right now it's the right time to buy the right piece of real estate with a whole lot of negotiations, kind of wind at your back, if you will, as a buyer.
Yeah. You brought up prices. You brought up home prices typically trend upwards, right? It's pretty rare for them to go backwards. But that's true of prices in general. And we actually, recently were posed the question by Gary, when historically have prices ever come down?
Yeah.
So we pulled basically all the examples, and frankly, we had to have a very loose term for down to get there, because really it's already super rare. And when we did it, you basically just get a long list of recessions. Severe ones, like you basically started the Great Depression, go into the 50s with the supply constraints coming out of World War II in Korea. And then you don't get another one, instance of like consumer prices going down, until you get to the 2008 financial crisis.
Right.
And even then it was a blip. Like we had to be kind of a little willing to take like almost negative price growth to even count that one. Again, same kind of deal with the pandemic, which obviously was like a very unusual circumstance in which like a ton of people stopped buying certain things for a decent period of time because we couldn't leave our houses.
That's right.
So there's really not a lot of mechanism for prices to go backwards or historical precedent. So we kind of just live in a world where, we try to have stable prices that are generally rising.
Right.
And that's part of what contributes to home prices rising, because if everything's going up 2%, prices for homes are generally going to track that or outperform it depending on supply and demand, right?
Yeah. Well, and as you said earlier, if inflation is going to be somewhere around 2 or 3% every year, then our housing is going to go up that much generally at minimum as well. So just what I hear you saying in that is, don't expect housing prices or mortgages or any big movements in one direction or the other. It's going to be a slow road to getting things back into a different housing market. I wouldn't say a different one than what we have today.
Yeah, affordability is going to start coming back, but it's just going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a combination of slower price growth and falling mortgage rates. And it's probably going to take, more than a year. It's going to take probably a couple.
Ouch. I mean, you're raining on my parade, Ruben, and it makes sense though, right? It makes sense. It's actually in the best interest of our economy that it is working this way. And so I just want to, again, implore our real estate professionals out there, just get really familiar with what's going on so that you can be so educated that you can inform your clients on how to help them make the best decision now and or in the near future.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, as always, thank you, Ruben. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because as Ruben said, next month we're going to be back with 2025 predictions, and you will not want to miss that.